Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 4 of our exploration of Asian horror films released in 2019. This is the final part of this video, which means that we have reached my personal favorite Asian horror films from this particular year. We have 8 movies that we will be discussing tonight, and the availability for most of these films is actually pretty good. Also, I do have full-length reviews for most of the films that we're talking about tonight. So, if you want some additional thoughts on any of these, just search them out on my channel. And as always, titles for all the movies I discuss tonight will be listed in the description box below. Now, the first film tonight, we're going to Japan. Not a huge surprise, and that is Signal 100. Again, 2019 Japanese horror. A homeroom teacher places approximately 40 students, including a girl named Reina, played by Kana Hashimoto, under a suicide hypnosis. 100 specific signals, consisting of ordinary behaviors like crying and laughing, will trigger these hypnotized students to commit suicide. Under fear of self-deletion, the students become involved in a death game to free themselves of this hypnosis by being the last one alive. Reina, with her strong sense of justice, attempts to avoid this desperate fate. Yes. So, over the years, I have covered a bunch of these, Japanese movies that revolve around death games. Battle Royale is an obvious one. But there's practically a subgenre of film in Japan dedicated to, trapping a bunch of people, typically students, in one location and having them fight to the death until there's one person left. Now, Signal 100 is one of the better ones, in my opinion. Some of the hypnotic signals are communicated early on. If you call someone for help on your phone, you'll kill yourself. If you try to inflict violence on someone else in the immediate area, including the teacher who's the villain, you will kill yourself. If you leave the school grounds or attempt to leave the school grounds, you will kill yourself. So this is a very restrictive scenario, and these students are put in a difficult position. But how exactly does this death game work if you cannot physically attack other people? Remember, you have to be the last one standing, but you can't attack anyone else. Okay, so the key to this is to find out the hypnosis signals before everyone else, and then manipulate other people into doing these signals to have them kill themselves. So it's a pretty interesting premise here. Definitely adds a different kind of twist on this cliche concept, and it keeps things interesting. There's also a scavenger hunt aspect where the students attempt to find clues to figure out what these signals are, and that could save their lives. There are a surprising number of actual death scenes in this movie. Now, many times in films with this premise, these Japanese films where you have a bunch of kids or students in one location, and there's one person who needs to survive. A lot of these films, surprisingly, will skimp out on the gore and violence. This film actually gives us some really fun death scenes. I did laugh at some of the more ludicrous death scenes in this, but I will not spoil those. But there's certainly a sense of black humor to this film, but not overtly so. So it maintains a nice tone where the threat of danger is there, and you have a little bit of black humor sprinkled in. There's enough blood to satisfy as well. And that's one of the big sells in this movie. There's a lot of death scenes in this. Now, production values feel like a theatrical film instead of a direct-to-video affair. And that's also a problem sometimes with films of this type that go real low budget. Feels a little lacking in production values. This one, it cashes in on the budget. Also, typically, Films of this type have bland, repetitive environments, but Signal 100 safely avoids that flaw. It gives us, like, splashes of color, you know? And again, this is a criticism I have with films of this type. It's like typically you're in one location, like a school. All the corridors look the same. It gets boring to watch visually. This film avoids that flaw. There's nice splashes of color. So I appreciate that. And Kana Hashimoto as an actress is pretty charismatic, and she's very nice on the eyes. She has very good facial impressions as well. So this is just a fast-paced popcorn horror movie, less than 90 minutes long. I really like this one. Solid. Now, the availability on this, it is available streaming on Tubi. Very easy to find. Pretty strong start in terms of pure entertainment value tonight. Now, the next film is more of a high-quality horror film, in a traditional sense. And we go to Taiwan for the next one, and that is Detention. This is more of a horror-drama hybrid. In 1962, during Taiwan's White Terror period, a student named Fang falls in love with her teacher and counselor. The freedom-loving teacher is an organizer of a student group for banned books, along with fellow teacher Yin and second-year student Wei. The study group provides a place to breathe in a dangerous environment, but its members risk death by participating in it. However, one day Fang and Wei awake to find that the school is no longer the familiar world that they remember. The building has become a horrific place with ghosts and demons, and the two students will be forced to confront a terrible truth. Yeah. So this movie was actually based on a video game. Do not let that scare you off. I know video game adaptations have a terrible history. This is a good one. This is actually a good movie. And it was also adapted into a 2020 Netflix television series of the same name. It's also quite good, but it did have pacing issues. So I prefer this movie over the TV show. Now, this film does a very good job of creating an atmosphere of oppression. Per Wikipedia, the term White Terror refers to the entire period from 1947 to 1987. That's a 40-year period of time. And around 140,000 Taiwanese people were imprisoned during this period, of whom about 3,000 to 4,000 were executed for their real or perceived opposition to the Chinese National Party led by Chiang Kai-shek. So this is like based on real-world events, and it's kind of terrifying when you put it into context. And because of this, the script has some significant thematic depth to it. It's a tyrannical situation that's also reflected in the relationships between the characters. Because if you think about it, when you have a tyrannical government or power, if you're like reading forbidden books, you have to be scared that within your group of people, one of you is going to be a snitch, and they'll report you to the government, and you're all screwed. So there's a lot of internal terror, anxiety, because like you're engaged in these activities, but if one of the people around you is a snitch, you're screwed. So it has a lot of that oppressive atmosphere here. In terms of scares, this jumps between the horrific alternate dimension. This is like an alternate dimension movie. And then the normal dimension. So you have the normal dimension that has this oppressive atmosphere. And then you have this horrific alternate dimension where the horrific or oppressive atmosphere becomes more literal. And the horror scenes are nicely shot. A nighttime blackness surrounds the characters. They use candles to look around in this atmosphere. It's vaguely familiar to Silent Hill, I would say. Not quite as intense, but it's vague. It reminded me of it a little bit. And the scare tactics do not rely on jump scares, which I appreciate. There's a cool-looking monster in the dark realm that reminded me of like a Grim Reaper. And he constantly stalks the protagonist. So, I mean, Detention overall, very solid quality movie. Definitely, I recommend it. And it's available on Tubi and Amazon. All right. Now, on rare occasions in this playlist, I will include a horror television series. As long as it's relatively short. It has to be kind of a mini-series in terms of episode count. Coma from 2006 and Tokyo Vampire Hotel from 2017 are two examples. And I would definitely recommend both of those. So I'm going to include the next one in 2019. And this one is legit, folks. From South Korea. This is Kingdom Season 1. Horror thriller TV show. Now this is set in the 15th century. It tells the story of a crown prince, played by Ji-hoon, good actor, who goes on a suicide mission to investigate a mysterious plague that's spreading across the country. And he soon discovers that it is an atrocious epidemic that forms itself into a legion of zombies. Then we are introduced to Bae Do-na's character, another really good actress, who is assisting people in need when a dead body is brought back to her village. And she discovers a horrific truth regarding the survival of the poor, which accelerates the zombie outbreak and leads to mass chaos. Alright, so all of the zombie-related stuff in this show is very impressive. The outbreaks are filmed very well, and the makeup is good, and there are some lengthy attack scenes that are fun to watch. Of course, the setting of 15th century Korea provides an unusual backdrop for a zombie mayhem, and it provides an opportunity to showcase weaponry that is typically not used in zombie films that are set in the modern times. Like we get like swords, bows and arrows, stuff like that. So I would say, like, I know there was a period of time in the 2000s, 2010s, we got zombied out in America. You know, with TV shows and movies, and it got kind of stale and repetitive. I would say, like, the, setting this in Korea in the 15th century adds a new dynamic that refreshes that genre of horror film. And that's a big sell to this. The gore levels are mild when compared to other zombie films, but the zombies are very aggressive and difficult to avoid for the humans. So this isn't a gore film, it's more of like, almost like a Train to Busan, where it's more suspense and threat driven instead of gore driven. This is season 1 of this K-drama. It's only 6 episodes long. The episodes range from 43 to 56 minutes long. You're talking like maybe 5 hours total of content. But this does end in the middle of the story on like a cliffhanger. So the second season was necessary. That came out in 2020, and I'm going to cover that in the next part of this video. But if you're into zombie horror, this is a strong addition to that subgenre of horror. I definitely recommend Kingdom. And, mild spoiler alert, season 2 of this show is better. Even better than season 1. All right? So this is definitely a strong recommendation for me. Now, Kingdom is available on Netflix still. It is. I almost wish Korea did more TV shows like this with like good production values, setting zombies in the ancient period or present day. It's cool stuff, folks. Cool stuff. Now the next one, we go back to Japan for the next one. Now this one is something that's like right up my alley. I might be overrating it a little bit, including it on the final part of this ranking, but I really enjoyed this one. And that is called Stare, also known as Shirai-san, right? 2019 Japanese horror. Following plot synopsis was taken from the Movies and Mania website. The dead are accumulating at a rate that's alarming, and the state in which the victims are discovered is even more so. They've all died of a heart attack, visibly provoked by extreme fear, and their eyes have literally exploded. Mizuki witnessed the death of her friend. Haruno lost her brother in nebulous circumstances, and these two students seek to understand the cause of this slaughter, and their investigation leads them to Eiko, who says she knows the origins of this mystery. Yes. Now, the casting in this movie is slightly frustrating. Alright, so I'm going to start with a little bit of a gripe here. We have Shota Somatani, who's been in a bunch of Japanese films over the years. We have Sawa Nimura, who's more of a newer talent. And then we have Mitsuki Tanimura, who's been in the horror realm for 15 plus years in support. But all these actors are in supporting roles in this movie. It kind of annoyed me. In my opinion, they should have been the leads. The actual lead actors, they're just adequate in this one. So you have 2 or 3 lead actors that are adequate. We have 2 or 3 supporting actors who are superior. So I don't know why they did this. Whatever. You know, it's a gripe. But anyway, you have this urban legend, right, surrounding this ghostly antagonist. It's pretty cool. The gist of this movie is that this ghost will target you if you merely know of her existence and know her name. That's all you need. So it's almost as if, like, the human tendency to pass down folklore is portrayed as a danger in this film. And word of mouth alone could end in death. So it's a pretty cool concept here. Pacing's pretty deliberate, but I enjoyed this. Solid production values, and it looks nice, despite not being, like, overly stylized. Now, sometimes when I review a horror film, and if you people have followed this playlist for a period of time, you will understand this. Sometimes I need to explain why I enjoy a film so much, despite the fact that it's not scary. And I've done this plenty of times. This movie is like the opposite. The horror sequences are like the actual highlights of the film. Very effectively shot, with great use of gloomy music that crescendos at appropriate times. I think the filmmakers may have been inspired by the Kiyoshi Kurosawa film Pulse. A little bit. There are a few little moments, I just kind of felt the influence a little bit. Now, this is not the masterpiece that Pulse was, but I do think those influences were a good thing because there are no cheap scares in this. There's an effectively creepy scene that takes place in a desolate road at night with a woman whose hands are tied together by a red rope. There are multiple ghost appearances that use almost no sound, with the exception of a little bell ringing. It's almost like a little ringing bell. When you hear the ringing bell, you're like, oh crap, it's going down, you know? And there's a supernatural stalking scene within a hospital that's pretty nicely done. And the ghost herself, like the way they designed this entity, very creepy. Especially like the facial features are like, it freaked me out. I'll give them credit for that. So this one is a very nice watch, and I watch it on a fairly regular basis. It's like when you hear about it, it's like it sounds like a typical Japanese horror movie, but it does everything kind of a level up above average, which is why I like it so much. I recommend Scare. It's a cool flick. Now, the availability, it's on Daily Motion right now. Daily Motion. All right? And we got 4 left tonight. Yeah, 2019 was a pretty good year for Asian horror. So we visit Vietnam for our next film. You know I like to bounce around here. So we go to Vietnam, and this is a high-quality flick. It is called Kumanthong. It's a horror thriller. It's a film that's inspired by a true story, quote-unquote. Soy is a deaf-mute girl living in a village deep in the heart of the Mekong Delta, until one day a stranger arrives on a boat downriver. Now, this stranger claims to be a shaman and a healer, but he quickly wins the attention and admiration of the village. after miraculously healing a few of the locals. Now, Soy immediately catches his eyes, and she becomes enchanted by him, unlike anything she has ever experienced. This bond soon blossoms into a romance, and they are soon married. However, the beautiful dream of Soy turns into a nightmare when she eventually discovers her new husband's dark past and his plan for immortality that involves human sacrifice and the conjuring of the dead. Now, this dude who shows up early on, you're thinking, like, this guy seems alright, you know? But within the opening half hour, you're like, this dude's shady, man. This dude is shady. He acts rather sensually to this pretty young girl, and he engages in acts of magic almost immediately. Now, again, sometimes he helps people with this magic, but, I mean, when you have, like, a wizard or a witch at your disposal, you gotta be careful. And this guy very quickly uses his abilities for evil. He manipulates our female lead, the young girl, into covering up some of his more shady activities. And then he blatantly threatens her early on. So, dude's definitely a slimeball, but he does a good job of convincing everyone else in the village that he's a good guy. So our protagonist is kind of isolated in her conflict with him. Now, there are some good character moments in this film, especially the scenes involving the two sisters. And the last half hour of this movie, it's got some balls. And this bad guy started to piss me off. Like, the villain in this film is good, because you wanna see him dead as a doornail by the end of this movie. So this movie does a good job of, like, generating drama to supplement the horror, or vice versa. So movies like this tend to have some tribal or superstitious elements. In Kumanthong, we get a bloody healing sequence that's quite impactful and kind of neat. There's a medical treatment scene involving the process that's pretty freaky. There's a treatment involving old school tattooing. So all of these little, like, I guess the treatments that the antagonist uses on people have a very specific, like, vibe to them. It adds some flavor that's different from your typical horror film. Now, this does rely on some slow burn suspense and threats that gradually build off of the human conflict. This film, Kumanthong, is very dramatically based and story based. So the horror builds off of the story and the conflicts. All right. There are a few macabre moments involving dead bodies, but this is primarily a classy affair, contributes to a number of spellcasting scenes, and the ending is satisfying enough. All right. Setting is like the rural, hot temperature setting, hot temperature weather. A good movie to watch on a hot summer night. And nice atmosphere, lots of candle lighting, and wooden architecture for the houses. So, very good quality Asian horror film. I think most people who watch this will enjoy it. So Kumanthong comes recommended. It is available on Viki streaming or Region 3 DVD. I originally bought this on the Region 3 DVD. Alright, we continue to jump around. We're going to Indonesia next. And the vibe is somewhat similar to Kumanthong, and the quality level is also similar. We have Impetigore from Indonesia. Down on her luck, Maya learns that she may inherit a house in her ancestral village. When Maya returns to the village with her local best friend Donnie, she's unaware that the community has been trying to kill her to remove the curse that's plagued them for years. As she unravels the complicated truth of her past, Maya finds herself in a fight for her life. So this film was directed by Joko Anwar, who is the same man who gave us The Forbidden Door, Satan's Slaves, and many others. Huge fan of this director. Alright. Now, as expected, Impetigore has like a stylish, effective direction and camera work. This is like high-class Indonesian horror. This is especially true in regard to the scares. We have like the opening sequence at the toll booth. Very effective. You have this woman at a toll booth, and she encounters like a weird customer, and she's all by herself. Very good. It has like this sense of isolation where like you have no escape. So it's a very good opening scene. We have, I love the camera shot during the execution scene. It is really cool. Later on, there's a fake out scare that's actually done well. I usually don't like fake out scares, but there's a few in this movie, but there's one that's done really well. It's almost like, it's unexpected because you think you actually believe this is like a real threat, and it turns into a fake out, and you're like, yeah, that was kind of a clever way of using that. Some scenes do get violent, and they certainly have an intensity to them, but there's also an emphasis on suspense and creepiness. A nice balance in this. Deliberately paced, but the horror scenes are spaced out nicely, and they are very intense. You have this forest village setting. Provides a hot, tribal environment. Overgrown plants, trees everywhere. And then you even have like a dusty, abandoned house to play. The architecture of the buildings are very different from what I usually see in America, which is pretty neat. And this would be nice to watch on a hot summer night. Did I just mention that? I feel like Kumanthong and Impetigore would be a really great double feature from two different Asian countries. I don't know. And we're in the summer season now. I don't know. I might be recommending this, all right? Sound design and scoring in this, very impressive. All this creates a great atmosphere, both during the day and night scenes. The lamps at night have this orangish hue. It's like orange hue a lot during night. Big a fan of it. Now, script-wise, this relies more on conflict over character development. And also, there are two flashbacks that fill in the mystery. You're trying to figure out, like, what's going on here. The first flashback is like a data dump with narration. It was fine. But the second flashback was more interesting because it uses visuals to communicate to the viewer. And that works a lot better. At the end of the day, Impetigore, very strong title. I recommend it. This is available on YouTube, Amazon, and it's also on Blu-ray. I like this so much, I bought it on Blu-ray. I believe it's in a 2-disc set with Satan's Slaves, the remake. So it's worth a watch, folks. We got some high-quality films tonight, for sure. Now, the last two tonight, we're going back to Japan, folks. Now, the next two are quite different from what we've seen previously. All right, and the next one here is called Mimicry Freaks. All right, from Japan. One morning, Fuma wakes up with his only son, Ren, in a deep forest. Suddenly, they are visited by a Japanese traditional monster known as the Namahage. At the same time, a car drives into the forest not far from them. A wedding planner is taking two lovers and the bride's father to a wedding ceremony hall for the rehearsal. They get lost and the car breaks down. These characters cross paths and must confront the Namahage, as well as the source of its creation. Now this film begins, I believe, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it begins with like a naked man dragging a broken chain in the forest. Like, what is going on here? Then we meet our protagonists, and weird stuff starts happening. Now, one of the themes of this movie is child abuse, so it gets kind of intense at times. There's also a strong element of mad science that's emphasized, and that's probably the main theme. And I really like mad science when it appears in horror movies. It always gives a different feel, and the plot usually becomes pretty interesting. Now, the story in this is pretty nightmarish and slightly fractured at times. So, the story in this, I would say the beginning and the end are a little bit more confusing than the middle. And you may need to kind of connect the dots yourself to navigate a few of the ambiguities. But you can easily tell what's happening most of the time. So, it might get a little confusing in spots, but don't let that scare you off, okay? This Namahage monster or whatever it's a pretty cool threat. It's almost like a human being, a tribesman with a demon mask over his face, but they're a little bit more, they have like more of a superhuman skill and stamina to them. The scare tactics in this work mostly due to their grittiness. Now, this film feels more like a film that would have been released in Japan during the mid-1990s. And if you have followed this playlist, and one of the main reasons I made this playlist for Asian horror is to give you an idea of like the industry trends throughout the last basically 100 years of Asian horror. And if you've seen the prior videos in this playlist, you would have noticed that in the 1990s, say late 1980s, 1990s, Japan went into like a gore fest. Before Ring was released in 1998, Japan was on like a gore fest streak, along with like the direct-to-video type stuff. And this kind of has the feel of those movies during that era. It does get nasty at times. The violence and gore are emphasized with practical effects, and that's a great choice. This movie came out in 2019, and they used primarily practical effects for the gore, which contrasts nicely with a lot of the modern films that use too much CGI. So that's a big positive for me. Now, does this get as nasty as some of like the nastiest Japanese films in the 90s? It doesn't, but it feels like it belonged in that era. There are some demented moments in this, some weirdness, a few uncomfortable scenes as well. This isn't like a fun slasher. It does get a little bit grimy at times, just so you know. There are some psychological aspects as well, and some legitimate suspense. Use of color is pronounced at times with artificial filters that are laid over to create disorientation. The music's good, uses a lot of ambient sound. So this is nicely paced, creepy, and intense, only 1 hour and 24 minutes long. Mimicry Freaks, if you like intense, kind of lower budget, violent, psychological films, check it out. Available on Tubi and YouTube, and it's also on DVD. Yeah, good one. Japan always finds a way to keep coming out with at least a few really interesting horror films every year. Now the next film, our final film of the evening, my personal favorite Asian horror film from 2019. And maybe a surprise, if you're someone who keeps up with this stuff, you've seen a bunch of this stuff, it may be a little bit of a surprise that I rate this as number one. However, am I biased? Maybe a little bit. I saw this movie in Japan, in the theater, on vacation. Also, I'm like a huge fan of the director. All right, Koji Shiraishi. He directed Noroi, also known as The Curse. I've covered, I would say, 24 of his films in this playlist alone. And he's like a director that, I don't know, a lot of people, he's getting more popular over time, but I still feel he doesn't get the credit he deserves. But anyways, this was based off a manga, which I have not read. And it was adapted into an anime series, which I own, but have not yet watched. And that is Hell Girl, also known as Jigoku Shojo. Yes. Hell Girl is a supernatural spirit who can be called to enact revenge on a human being's behalf. If you have been wronged by someone and you want to have this person or spirit murdered and sent to hell, you could call upon Hell Girl to do so. The problem is that you must pay for this service by going to hell after you die. So there's huge consequences for this. But perhaps your hatred for the person that you want to die and suffer is worth sacrificing your very soul. Yes. So from the opening sequence alone, I saw this, I went to Japan, and I knew it was directed by Koji Shiraishi. So I'm like, oh, baby, this is a premiere with Koji Shiraishi when I'm in Japan. I'm watching this. And I was like psyched up, and even from the first sequence alone, I'm like, I'm going to love this movie. Right up my alley. We're treated to like some really neat atmosphere. Deep red skies, really colorful environments. You're in a school, right? But like you have like flying crows, black crows outside the window in like a red hellish environment. Like this is like right up my alley. And this movie immediately grabs you from a visual standpoint. Now the opening introduction also resolves itself. It's almost like a short film, the opening 5 to 10 minutes, but it does a great job of not only introducing Hellgirl herself and her minions. Yes, she has minions. But it also establishes the basic rule system and introduces one of the main human characters who we see throughout the remainder of the film. The scriptwriting creates an intriguing series of subplots that help to develop the main premise. And the character interaction is very interesting. The best performance of the film comes from Sawa Nimura, who also appeared in Stare, which I just covered in this video. Good year for her in terms of Japanese horror. And she plays a rebellious girl who befriends our main protagonist. Now, Nimura has a very realistic way of portraying a gritty character. And her expression of emotion is very convincing. I want to see more from this actress. I feel like 2019 was she really made her presence felt in the industry. But I need to look up what else she's been in. I almost feel like she's going to be underrated by the industry. But in any case, we got 2019 is a ground zero for this actress's career. Now, this movie does not rely on jump scares, another huge positive for me. Sound design does get intense, but it's almost like a crescendo of organ music and log-sustaining background sounds, which, I approve of, because you're watching a scene, and it gets more and more and more and more intense, and the background music swells to the point where you're getting a little unnerved and stuff, which is cool. The death scenes are creative and entertaining to watch. There is some human-inflicted violence here as well, and that's a nice thing about having Koji Shiraishi as a director. He's done a bunch of creepy movies, wacky movies, mean-spirited movies, movies where you have human protagonists, movies where you have supernatural antagonists, all kinds of stuff. And he peppers all of this into this film, and really adds to the variety, and it gives the film just enough of an edge. I really enjoyed Hellgirl. I just find it consistently entertaining and fun. And, that's my favorite of the year. It's my favorite. Now, this is available streaming on Dailymotion. You may be able to find a bootleg DVD out there, but watch it on Dailymotion first. Yeah, so there you have it. Those are my top 8 favorite Asian horror films from 2019. Now, Japan took the top 2 positions. Not a huge surprise. That's what they do. I feel like movies from this year were more consistent overall compared to some of the other years prior to it. And hopefully you'll check out a few of these and enjoy them. One unfortunate fact is that Asian horror production seemed to dip during 2020 and 2021 due to a worldwide event that was happening at the time. It is what it is. But nevertheless, I will be covering those years in the near future to keep this exploration of Asian horror going. But again, in the meantime, if you're newer to this channel, in this playlist, there are over 90 videos in this Asian horror playlist to watch. And you may have some catching up to do. But I feel like this playlist has done a good job of giving us an idea of how the industries are going. You know what I mean? And things keep changing, folks. Things keep changing. But we'll see how things go during the 2020s. We're in the 2020s now. Yep, we are indeed. So, as always, folks, I'll see you next time.